If this beeps, because it will after half an hour, but it'll
Yeah.
kick back and just ignore it.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
I had a memory card issue where the one I was using, while it was much bigger in size, the buffer wasn't. I had to do some research. I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I'll give you the keyboard to do the boop.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
One watching now, that's you, right?
Hmm?
The one watching now is you.
Yes, but that's the time delay. So this is the actual live one.
Yeah,
So 1 minute forward.
Okay.
And that's the second stream, which goes to your channels.
Ah, nice. Cool.
So you've got the two chat windows, that one and
Yes.
that one.
Cool.
So that's your channels. These are kind of mine.
Yes. And I've got my glasses on, so I should be able to see some.
Oh, just do everything. Just
Yeah.
have fun with it.
Yeah.
Take time and enjoy it. Like it's a first. It's the practice. That's what
It is. I really enjoy this. I just
scary.
It is. I don't know how you do it all the time. It's such.
It's because I forced myself to do it.
Do you? Do you
it's
get
the standard.
scared
I've set
too?
myself the standard to do it once a week. Come hell or high water, and make stuff up and practice.
It's really, really good. Yeah. I mean, how else? So it's the yellow one.
So when you're ready, press yellow, and it goes to you. And then to end the stream later, it's the big.
Perfect. Just had to double check that. And time to do it now actually. Hello and good morning. My name is Ashleigh King and I am a guest presenter on the Roadmap MBA. It's so lovely to see anyone watching today. I am so looking forward to chatting to you about a topic that is very close to my heart. I love the topic of leadership and learning all I can about it. I did a leadership and management degree as my undergraduate studies, and so it's a topic I've loved exploring over the years and also studying in my Masters in Business Administration and MBA. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some thoughts today, and please do say hi in the chat if you're here. It's so lovely to see you, so hello to those of you who are saying hello already. So today we're going to be talking about leadership and its importance in organisational change. While I'm just waiting for anyone to come on, I just wanted to tell you that a little bit about me if you haven't met me yet. So I am a podcaster and a creative entrepreneur. I have my own podcast studio in the Oosburn in the Valley of Newcastle, and I love doing things with people and projects that are very artistic and fun in the tech sector and creative industries. I am a guest presenter for the Roadmap MBA, so if you haven't come across the Roadmap MBA, just so you get to know a bit about it, it is a course that you can study at home. It's something that you can also access classroom sessions online, and you can work through a really fantastic workbook. It's now all over the world. It was 28 countries, it's growing. It's so wonderful to see it expand all the time. And the whole point of the Roadmap MBA is to make education more accessible. So I'm hopeful that in my session today, when I'm talking about leadership, we'll get just some great ideas shared. And if you have any thoughts or comments, then please do share them with us today. Okay, so first of all, leadership. Why does it matter? What is important about leadership in organizational change? So leaders, a question I often get, and it's a question I've wondered myself as well, is what is a leader? Who is a leader? So what makes you a leader? How can you be a leader? And it's something that students often ask me if I'm mentoring them or things like that. And I think there is an idea that you can only be a leader if you have a positional power responsibility. So one of the things I will discuss in a later Roadmap MBA session is power and how you can have different types of power. But for leaders, anyone can be a leader, in my opinion, and there is other researchers who believe that too. So you can lead in your individual circumstances. You can be a leader in charity or voluntary pursuits that you do, but also in your workplace. However, I also want to say that we obviously do have leaders of our country, our political leaders, and we're watching all of these people making decisions about us and for us, sometimes without our involvement or our participation. So leadership is very important in organisational change, because what happens in workplaces, whether it's a factory or whether it's a small, fast growing startup, or whether it is, a retail chain, a conglomerate around the world, many of the challenges that happen in organisations can be solved by leaders, but also caused by leaders. So one of the things I wanted to share, or actually I wanted to ask you or anyone watching, is what are the worst types of leaders you've ever experienced? Do you have a story that you can share in the comments or the chat? Do you have any kind of reflections looking back and thinking, oh my gosh, that was such a terrible leader? And what I wanted to comment on there is actually some emerging trends or some recent kind of news articles around leadership. So there are so many conversations with the COVID pandemic where staff have been sacked or fired on a Zoom call, sometimes as a group Zoom call in front of lots of people, not giving a pre-warning, and in some of those instances that's actually led to some of those staff having very serious mental health problems, and in some cases taking their own lives. There's also examples of leaders that we like and trust who are very senior in our political landscape who are behaving in a way that we wouldn't expect leaders to behave. So they maybe have been hypocritical, or they've done certain things that we just didn't expect. So there's a lot around leadership where we look at leaders and we think, well, what is a leader? What are the behaviors of a leader? But also trust in leadership is really important. John C. Maxwell is one of my favorite writers around leadership, and he speaks a lot about the importance of integrity in what we do. So yeah, if you have any really embarrassing stories or horrible stories about leaders, please do share them. I did want to also mention that just when I was thinking about what to talk about today, 2 leaders who really stood out to me. So I was fortunate to work with 2 women who were leading a very large faculty, and they had very different styles of leadership. One was a director and one was a deputy director, and they were polar opposites. One was very vibrant and engaging, and if I used to say things at my desk like, oh, I'm just not good at this, or I can't do that, or I can do this, she would say things to me in a very push way. You get push and pull leadership, but she would say things to me like, actually, when did you decide that you can't do that? How did you decide that? How did you come to that assumption about yourself? And she would always challenge me and correct my language and the way I was talking about myself. And I found it so empowering. And she would often, say hello to everybody. And that really meant a lot to me, because watching her from a distance helped me to see that she spoke to the cleaners, she spoke to the head of the university, she spoke to everybody. But she had such a great network, and it really helped her. And it meant that if she needed anything, then she could just call people. And actually, as my own career developed, I was able to develop some of these skills too. So I think, we're getting some comments now that self-talk is really important. It is, it's very important, and actually having a leader who can challenge our own views of ourselves and our self-talk is really powerful too. On the other hand, the other leader that I was inspired by was much more process orientated, thorough, thought in a different way to me. And actually, I would observe them in meetings because sometimes I felt like I could watch them change their tone, change their stance. I could see when they were negotiating because their body language would change. And it taught me again how sometimes you need to step into a role even if you don't feel that you can or should, or if you're in an uncomfortable situation. So it taught me that value of speaking as a leader and how you can negotiate and how you can use your influence in a way that's helpful and supportive, but actually is more constructive than aggressive. So I think leaders are really important, and more than ever, we do need leaders. But leaders are under tremendous pressure, which is something I'm going to go into now. So one of the things I'd like to talk about is how leaders are forced at the moment to respond under so much pressure in a VUCA world. If you haven't heard the term VUCA before, it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. So that is a term that you will hear in your MBA if you're studying one, or sometimes just in leadership theory. So a VUCA world it's an example of a very fast pace shifting landscape. So many leaders have been under pressure. You know, if we look back at leadership theory, if we look back at the 80s, you had people who were going to get their MBA, they would learn all these wonderful skills. A very common thing they would learn would be strategy. You'd look at things like Porter, you'd look at, very standard leadership theory and management theory. You would also look at things like Ford, process-orientated leadership, so many different things. However, time has changed so quickly. In the last 20 years, it feels like it's just accelerated because we've had so much technological growth. We're interconnected now. Information changes so quickly. We can send information so quickly, and there's always a pressure for leaders to be on their emails, to check their notifications, to be on their Slack channels, their Monday.com, their Facebook, their Trello, their all of these different tools we're using. And at the same time, there's also worth mentioning, you have that difference between a manager and a leader. So you have the idea that you have someone who's going to be leading from the front or from the back or leading alongside. There's so many different nuances now of leadership, of ways you can lead. There's different ways and theories around leadership and mentoring. Do you coach someone? Do you use this framework or that framework, a particular model? So leaders are under so much pressure, but then also they have to lead their teams and their managers. And sometimes that can be quite hierarchical, and sometimes it can be quite flat. So actually, there are so many pressures just to even decide what type of organizational structure you want. But before you do that, you also need to think about any change you make is going to have an impact on your people. And so we're seeing a lot of challenges at the moment around, we talk about the Great Resignation. People are leaving jobs. They're looking for better leaders. They're looking for, more work-life balance, more flexibility, more self-care. They want to be able to have the opportunity to talk about some of the challenges they experience. They want to be able to care for their families, their elderly parents, so more than ever, we have leaders under a lot of pressure, but we also have our people who need more and want more, and they actually won't accept the status quo anymore. So you'll hear a lot of different words around leadership, like authenticity, leading with a vulnerability. And this is all being explored right now by some fabulous researchers. But when we look at how leaders can respond, as well as all of this thought piece, there's actually the day-to-day challenges of this completely volatile and uncertain and complex world. So with that, if we look at some of the challenges like fuel crises, increased shipping costs, extra additional tax tariffs, or government or world politics that are actually affecting organizations, especially in a global context, there are so many things that are interconnected. And actually, that's where more than ever our leaders are under pressure to make decisions with sometimes inconsistent information or changing information, or a lot of shifting pieces of the puzzle that they need to have. So there's a lot of speculative decisions being made, and that can be really challenging. So it's very difficult for our leaders now to do all of this big thinking when they haven't got the time. They've actually just got to deliver. So one of the things we'll discuss is some of the ways how you can actually cope with that as a leader, but also as an individual, how you can create your own responses as a leader. Okay, so I wanted to talk about one of my favorite things, which is transactional versus transformational leadership. This is quite a big topic, and it's something I've explored in quite a lot of depth. I could go through so much theory, but what I'd like to do is just share some of the broad findings. So if you haven't heard of this concept before, it is a bit of a tension in leadership. So transactional leadership is very much around process. It's very much around numbers, statistics, key performance indicators, so your KPIs or your OKRs, another word you'll hear often, which is your objectives and key results. So these are all very metric centric. So it's all about how are you creating outputs? How are you getting things done? Are you writing your reports? Are you meeting your deadlines? How many sales have you got? How many people have you got? How often are they working? And then at the same time, you've also, if you match that, you're looking at things like, in the news at the moment, we look at things such as people being pressured to go back into the office after working from home, because we're thinking about the space that we have as organizations and the desks that are sitting empty. And so you can definitely see that transactional leadership around numbers and people, and it's quite cold and it can be very distant in terms of there's not a lot of emotion there. So that is one particular style of leadership, and it's so valuable, it's so important. It is something that helps us to meet our targets, it helps us to grow our revenue, but it can also, on the negative side, be very cold and distant, and it can mean that you do prioritize the needs of your shareholders or your board of directors than your team and your staff. On the other side, you have transformational leadership. So this is where you usually have someone who's very people orientated, and that's all about our people. Are our people okay? What do they need? Do they need training? Do they need support? Do they need some coaching or mentoring or free access to counseling? What occupational health support is in place? Do they feel like they're getting something from work? So that will be very much about training, advising, things like group forums or working groups or working together on projects. It's very collaborative. And actually, when I first heard these two words, it made me think, well, they seem so different, so polar opposite. And actually, it really resonated with me because it made me think of the leaders that I had looked up to, where you had this amazing deputy and this amazing director who were so different, but actually it was their blend of leadership that got them the results. And so this got me thinking, could you have a mixture of transactional and transformational leadership? Is that the answer to organizational change? Is that how we cope as leaders with difficult circumstances? And so it's something that I started to research in assignments, but also in my own reading. And I came across some really interesting theories that already were out there, but all contributed to this. So one of the theories around that is theory E and theory O. So that's De Beer and Noria. So that is very much around the E part is the transformational leader, the people person, and the O part is back to that process orientated person. And then I also found this again looking at McGregor's theory of motivation. So if you've heard of the carrot and the stick before, You've got the carrot is, you know, the intrinsic rewards. So it's things like, you know, what are the things that are going to make that person feel special? Is it a certificate? Is it, you know, accreditation? Is it a promotion? Is it some kind of self-actualization need? Is it something about belonging, feeling safe? Is it team nights out? You know, it's all of that kind of motivation. On the other side, though, we have the extrinsic rewards, which are much more around, you know, your money, extra titles, status, promotions. And so there is, again, this tension between all of these things. And as I was doing this research, I was finding that there is always this tension between the transactional and the transformational. And so what I started to find is actually hybrid leadership was really a key answer, and it was something that was this blend. But the challenge is we all have unique personalities, we all have unique skills and experience and training and backgrounds. Every organization is unique. You have pre-existing teams. You've got people who are responding to change in their own ways. You've got all kinds of historic things to deal with when you're doing an organizational change you know, delivery. So how are you going to deal with all of that? And what I did was I actually spoke to over 100 staff to get their thoughts on a large-scale change experience that was happening. And what fascinated me was the difference in personalities and the way they responded to change. So again, if you're listening and you're watching, please do leave in the comments any funny things that have happened for you around change. But one of the things that I was really surprised at is how such small things can have such an impact on people. You have sometimes people getting upset if they are moved from one desk to another, if they can't access if the sandwich shop that used to be in their office doesn't run anymore, or it's not open, they don't know where to go and buy their sandwiches. It could be something like working with a particular favorite manager for a series of years, and then that manager leaves, and actually that whole team might leave because they felt so safe and supported by that person, and they don't like the new person. So there are so many things that people feel and experience with change, and it's really interesting to look at what worries one person might not be the same as another. So when we are creating change programs, there is a lot to be done around fostering that change and creating that space, actually a psychologically safe space for change. One of the things I noticed around transformational and transactional leadership is it's not a new idea. In fact, the idea of a hybrid leader is not a new idea. So if we think of something like Aristotle, you know, is a very well-known and you know, a famed philosopher from centuries back. And if we think of Aristotle, he wrote his theory of rhetoric, and it's something that I use a lot when I'm training people and doing communication skills. And with Aristotle's theory of rhetoric, he talked about logos, pathos, and ethos, which is all around different ways you can communicate with people. So if you communicate with people and you are sharing your insights and you have stats and facts and references, then you will appeal to the logos, the logical side. And if you have an audience of people who are listening, you are going to reach them because they are the ones who maybe need that transactional approach, who need the facts and the stats, the processes. So if you are leading in a change initiative, you need to be able to say, well, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is what it will cost, this is the impact it will have to your day-to-day. So for that type of learner or a staff member, you actually need to be able to give them a very clear overview of your plan, how you've come to it, but how it's going to affect their work. They want to know about the bottom line, how it's going to affect customers, but very much from a viewpoint of how much will this affect our efficiency. You also have your pathos, where you will have your credibility, your, you know, what is it that makes you credible that someone will listen to you. So sure, we can all be leaders. We can be leaders in our own individual lives and in our organizations, but sometimes that can be about your positional power, or it might be that sometimes in an organization, particularly if you are leading a change initiative, you might need a project sponsor, so someone who's very senior at the top who will lead that program, but also you might need a working group or some kind of structure that people can understand, so they can see that this is well governed, there's rules and things around it, and there's credibility. And also with that, you'll have your authenticity and your trust, which is very important. And then you have your ethos, which is all around the ethics and the values, and do people want to be involved in that? Do they want to come on the journey? So if you look at Aristotle's theory of rhetoric, actually hybrid leadership is not a new thing. It might be a buzzword that we might use now, and talking about hybrid ways of working, hybrid ways of managing change, hybrid ways of running things. But actually, it's not new. It's something that we have been doing for a long time. We're just adapting our language and our words. And you see this with a lot of leadership terms and words that you'll use in your MBA. One of the ones that struck me when I was doing my MBA was actually innovation. So we spoke a lot about innovation. We spoke a lot about, things like the glass bottle, the open door innovation, closed door innovation. And actually looking at innovation and innovation history and theory, it's been happening for centuries. We just have been using different words. And that's, a really exciting thing. So I think it's really important to look back and think about some of these things. How do we actually grow as leaders? And can you have that mix? Can you have that transactional and transformational styles of leadership? And I absolutely agree that you can. One of the things that I've learned personally is that there are certain things I'm not good at. There are certain things that I can do, but they take me a really long time. So actually, by working with other people who are really good at those things, I can be better at what I do, and that can help me to produce more and get more done. And so one thing I would like to argue for anyone listening is, if you are in a leadership position, or you have an organizational change project you're working on, actually having different people with different skills is so important, to have that diversity of thought, because with diversity of thinking, you have that catalyst for innovation, you have that conflict, and it will create conflict. Change always does, but it means that you can have the needs of your different types of staff met, as well as your needs of your organization, and it gives you a much more blended and balanced approach to your change programs. It's really lovely to see the comments come in. I love seeing who's here and, saying hello, and I'm just having a quick peek at them. Thank you so much to everyone watching. I think, so one of the comments that's come in is about empathy. That is so true. It really is important to understand different personalities. But empathy is a skill that not everybody has. It's a soft skill, so it can be developed, and it's something, self-awareness, empathy, and also training around unconscious bias can be really useful, because one of the things that really shocked me when I was doing my research around change and organizational change and how people respond to different types of leaders was actually the things, as I mentioned, that upset people when change programs are happening. And I was just completely shocked at some of the ways that people would perceive certain activities. So what you often find with organizational change, a really big problem is gossip. It's a huge issue if you have a change program, and you will start to hear so many things that aren't always correct, and I've seen this and observed it, and you think, well, how did they come to that conclusion? But if you don't address it as a leader, if you don't give people information, it's ambiguous. And so what that means is it gives people space to make assumptions. It gives people space to start believing that they've been pushed out, that something else is happening, that there isn't room for them anymore. So it's really interesting, that whole point about empathy and self-awareness and exploration. And I think it's difficult actually when you're busy and you need to make that time for stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what you can do. So what can you do as a leader to help with organizational change? And when I say leader, again, that could be at any level. But if you are in a position of responsibility or you are trying to lead an initiative around change, what I wanted to talk about with that as a leader, some kind of key things you can do. So one of the ones that I love is to create alignment. So tell people what you're doing, maximize communication. So keep your emails informational, factual. If you don't have the information, tell them. So, one of the things when I was studying my MBA, it was during the COVID pandemic, and actually as students, we were receiving a lot of information every day. We didn't know whether we could go into a class. We had international trips planned, we had consultancy things planned, and we didn't know what was happening. But one of the things that I really liked about the way that my university handled that was they gave us daily briefings. And so those daily briefings would contain information about things that were happening. But one of the key things was if they didn't know an answer, they would say, we're working this out together. We have a task force on this. We have a dedicated resource to looking into ways to support you. There is some funding you can apply for. Here are some resources. Here are some resources to support your mental health. And so I think that's one of the key things, is actually aligning your creating that alignment for your teams so that they know the journey you're going on. But even if you don't know yet, also having that communication around that and saying, some things we haven't figured out quite yet, but we know that something needs to change. And so we're going to take you on that journey. We're going to do it together, and we're going to figure it out, but we're going to give you the information as it comes in and, as we can. The other thing is to spark motivation. So to spark motivation to me means to actually get people energized. And sometimes that can be, and this is used in change management a lot, it can be controversial depending on how it's used. Sometimes you force people into change, and you see this where there can be, with the UK as an example, or the global, everyone being forced into a lockdown. That was something where the government had information or knew that something had to be done. People had to be supported and kept safe, so they forced people into lockdown pretty much overnight. And so that's something that can be really useful to create a catalyst for change, whether it's in a business or in some other way. And it can be used sometimes negatively. When you have people, you might turn up to work and find out that that company's been liquidated and you don't have a job. So it can be used in a detrimental effect as well. But this is why it's so important to take your people with you, create that alignment, maximize the communication, tell them what's going on, and then spark their motivation to come on the journey. So bring them with you, even if you're saying, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna, roll up my sleeves and I'm gonna get in here. I'll never forget when I worked in a waitressing job. I was a staff trainer for Nando's. I would always see the best managers for me were the ones who, at the end of the night, they'd finished all their finances, they'd done what they needed to do. They would check the quality and standards of the restaurant, so they wouldn't just be rushing off. They'd make sure everything was done and clean, but they would actually lend a hand and take some trash out or help with some mopping. And it was that kind of signifying that we're all in this together and we're all going to do this together. And it made you want to work harder because you knew that your leader was there by your side. The other thing is to develop capability. So to help people to actually do what they need to do in their roles, and that could be through extra training, through extra support, but you need to have that structural support around people in their team. It's also worth remembering that people respond to change in different ways. So if you have diverse teams, which many of us do, and they are becoming more and more diverse, you may have people with different needs. So for myself, I'm neurodiverse. I might not receive information in the way that somebody else gives it to me. So one of the challenges that we can have as leaders is we can believe that everyone is understanding what we mean, and that's not always the case. So that's why, back to the communication piece, if you can be clear, if you can share boundaries or deadlines or expectations and make it really, really, really clear, that is so important. And then the last thing is just to share knowledge and just keep that conversation going, just keep talking, keep sharing the journey you're on. So I wanted to reflect very briefly on a time where I've had to be a leader like this, but where maybe I wasn't in a position of huge power or responsibility. So I was working on a project where it became quite tense. We were working with some community partners, and it was a very high profile global project. And what happened was some of the project, the communities who were involved felt that certain creative talent was being brought in from all over the world at a high cost to funding and things like this, whereas local talent, local creators were being kept away from opportunities that they could have applied for, being paid for, and that would have saved travel, it would have been more environmentally friendly, it would have supported their industry, it would have supported these creatives to develop new skills. And so I, in that position, didn't have the positional power to actually make any decisions that were directly going to help. But what I did have was I had the opportunity to use my influence and use my voice to actually advocate for those community members. And so I found myself in a position where I was actually dealing with a very aggressive group of people who were very angry. And what I had said to them was, you're right, you have every right to be angry. And what I had done was I listened to them, listened to all of their concerns, gone through them one by one, and actually explored them and said, well, yes, you're right. With this point, yes, that's the truth. With that point, actually, I'm not sure how you've come to that finding or conclusion, but the truth is actually that amount that you've got in your mind is not right. And so actually having that conversation, although it was really scary, was so powerful because it meant that I developed new skills as well around empathy, but also I was able to advocate for them because I really understood their voice. I understood why they were upset. At the same time, the project was better. We avoided lots of public relations risks of things going really significantly wrong. And actually, I was able to make some friends and contacts for life that I still work with now. So even in that position, even though I, maybe wasn't the most powerful person in leadership in that place, I was able to use my voice. And I think that's really important when we look at diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And then the last thing that I wanted to say around that is a little bit more about what you can do as a person, so as an individual in your workplace, okay, or in any change program, okay. So sometimes we're all thrust into things that go wrong. We can choose to be excited about it, we can choose to be terrified, we can choose to feel challenged, happy, scared. When the COVID-19 pandemic happened, I was studying my MBA, but I was also running a business, and it was all around events and festivals. And overnight, my financial situation dramatically changed. I was a student, so I couldn't access any government support for people who were not earning very much money. My business, all the projects weren't happening because there were no events. And I wasn't able to apply for various government schemes. So I found myself in this situation where I was thinking, what do I do? How am I going to cope with this? And so some of the things that I wanted to share that you can do as an individual are, if, for instance, someone said to you, we're going to change our staff, we're going to do a complete restructure, we've got 3 senior positions, your team of 10 is going down to 5, you can decide what to do, and you're thinking, how am I going to pay my mortgage? I actually don't know how I'm going to, pay for my kids' childcare, or whatever your personal circumstances are. It can be very hard to be positive in times of organisational change when you don't have the resilience and the resources. So actually building your own resilience is really important. So there are some things that you can do there. One of the things that I would recommend to do is to consider the stories you're telling yourself, and be very kind about the self-care and, the self-talk that you're actually indulging in. So sometimes when we are rejected or when things go wrong, it can be very easy to stop focusing on that negative criticism. So you may find, for instance, if you were let go from a job, The first thing might be, oh my gosh, they hate me, or I can't believe they did that, they don't appreciate me, or any of those things. But it could be that actually there just isn't the funding anymore. The funding's ended and there isn't a role, and it is that simple. And unfortunately, this is where we can have some tensions and conflict around different personality types, but also that way of interacting with change. Because if you are a process-orientated person or a transactional personality, where it's very much about how things are funded, the processes, the outputs, you can sometimes understand being rejected a little bit more. But sometimes if you're more on the empathic side, and if you're more into personality and people, it can feel like you've been rejected, no one likes you, you don't have any value, and that can be really hard. So some ways to help you get through that, to get your next job, to be a better leader, or to deal with that, are to actually, as an individual, take the responsibility. You can upskill yourself. This is really important. Are there any new things you can learn or read, or new vocabulary? So for instance, you could listen to podcasts, you could read, you could watch documentaries about change, or whatever you're dealing with. I find this so helpful. So when I was going through that phase of thinking, how am I going to make this work? How will I create a business? I actually threw myself into learning about online courses, and actually that really helped me to develop new skills and knowledge and grow. And actually, I would like to say, on that note about upskilling, I feel like I'm doing that right now. I'm absolutely terrified every time I do these sessions, but every time it just pushes me that little bit further, because as a podcaster, I can interview people, I can host people, I can be a guest for someone else. But to actually deliver your own content and your own knowledge and theories and thoughts and opinions live, that's going externally to people watching, and you don't know who's watching, that can actually be really, really frightening. So I would say that upskilling part is really important. Actually, that growth curve, we don't grow if we're not uncomfortable. So how are you going to support yourself through that? At the same time, there are things like self-care. I'm not saying that self-care is the solution to burnout, for instance. I've done a session on burnout for this show, and I do believe that with burnout, prevention is cure. And I think actually organizations have more responsibility than ever to make sure their staff do not burn out. But what I am saying is there are simple things that don't cost any money that you can do to help support you and give you more resilience going through organizational change. And so those can be, sleep. Try to get extra sleep at night, cut down on your caffeine, drink more herbal tea if you can, write, journal, exercise, go for walks in nature. It doesn't have to be bubble baths, it doesn't need to be expensive. It might be going and walking around and taking in a new city, or admiring the architecture somewhere. Whatever works for you, but self-care can be really helpful in developing that resilience. And then self-promotion is a really important one, actually. So that sounds kind of weird. I've just talked about self-care and upskilling, and now I'm talking about self-promotion. But actually, if you are in a position where you might have just lost your job and you are wanting to get another job or be promoted, or you want people to see you, actually having that positivity and that, approach to looking for something else. So going and searching for networking events you can go to, going and finding out more about people, learning about things, telling people what you're doing, telling people what you might go and do next. So I'll never forget, I was made redundant in 2019, and it broke my heart. I was so upset. It really hurt because I'd loved my organization and I'd taken all these wonderful promotional opportunities, but they were always risky. And so with the last one, it was a contract that was coming to an end. It wasn't a personal thing, but it hurt. And so what I discovered was actually all of the connections I was able to make and all of the people I'd been working with, I was able to start saying, hey, do you have any projects? Hey, I'm going to be unemployed for a little while. Is there anything I can help out with? Can I volunteer here? Can I do this? And what I found is, as I was sharing that information on LinkedIn and telling people what I was up to, that actually brought new opportunities, it brought new ideas. So those are just some tips. Also thinking about your unique selling points. So remember, if, for instance, for any reason you're going through some kind of organizational change and something goes wrong, or you're exploring it, there are always opportunities when change happens. So how can you use that to your advantage? Who can you help? What can you do? What is special about you? And what new skills can you develop that can actually help you to step ahead of the curve? So even for instance today with this presentation, I'm being filmed in 360 filming style, which is brand new to me. I don't know anything about that, and it doesn't really affect the way I'm speaking to you. But it means that for those people who want to watch me in 3D virtual reality, I don't know why you would, but if you wanted to, you can now do that, because Steve Pugh, who runs this channel and runs the Roadmap MBA, is upskilling to be ahead of the curve for new changes in technology. And I think that's really exciting. But again, what are you doing to challenge yourself today to help upskill yourself? So those are some of my my thoughts around change and organizational leadership. I'm very honored to have some people in the audience, like my friend Ifeanyi, Tony, watching. So nice to see you here. He's one of the most talented young people I've been able to work with. So really excited to see some of the people here and watching and chatting. I hope today has been helpful, just as a bit of an overview around leadership and some of the things that can come up. It's very difficult to talk about all of the theories and all of the content around leadership because there is so much to discuss. You have so many nuances and facets around leadership, like power, politics, the very external structures. So what I would say is, if you are looking at any leadership challenges or things you need to look at, do try to invest time to explore the external factors around you. So you've got both your internal and external factors, so that it helps you make better decisions. But really nice to see you all today, and thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time.
Yay! Time relax.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad Tony was on.
Yeah, it's funny, I've learned that when I comment underneath this, it's like a reply. It doesn't pop up. Yeah, you learn about what comes up. It doesn't come up. Yeah, this did its R2D2 noise, didn't it?